I got pregnant and started learning about birth, I did not realize what labor would look like and be like. I kind of thought it was something that happened really fast, like all of a sudden your water breaks, you go into labor and you have a baby, and it all happens like within like an hour period or something, this really intense hour period. But that is not the case. Not the case at all. So baby Luna was born on Friday, January 5th at 7:19 p.m. and I started to go into labor, I think, on that Wednesday before. And what happened was I was at home working, and you know what? It was like the day before. It was probably Tuesday. I started having like this weird pain in my side, and it wasn't, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like a stabbing pain. It did not feel like what I assume a contraction would feel like. It was a stabbing pain, and I kind of just thought maybe it was something I ate was bothering me, or, you know, it was just a random pain. But then Wednesday, it was happening more and more, and so I called the doctor just to ask about it, and they told me to come in because they said it's a slight possibility it could be appendicitis, so I need to get it checked out, which I was pretty confident it was not appendicitis because I would assume I would be in much more pain. But I went to get it checked out, and while I was there, they decided to hook me up to a monitor to kind of see what was going on. And the doctor noticed that I was having contractions, and I don't really know what she was seeing, but she seemed pretty concerned, and she had me drinking apple juice. She had me changing my position and sitting up and down, and she's like, no, you're definitely having contractions. And then she decided to do a cervical check on me and found out that I was 2 centimeters dilated already, and I was 34 weeks at the time, a little over 34 weeks. So she was very surprised, and she said, you know, it's possible you could have this baby early. Just in case, we're gonna have you take the beta shots. And this is like, is it a steroid shot? I don't quite remember what it is, but it's a shot. I think it's a steroid, and it helps to develop the baby's lungs quickly, so that if she were born early, her lungs would be developed enough so that she would be able to breathe okay. And so I got my first steroid shot that day, and she told me to, which also, the steroid shots are not fun because they do it in your butt, and it's very, it's not horrible, it was definitely tolerable, but it's one of those shots that like kind of stings after the fact instead of like while you're getting it, so that was fun. But she told me that if anything like were to progress, like if I started to feel like I was having contractions or whatever, to go to the hospital right away. So I went home thinking, like, not knowing what to think really. Andrew and I were just assuming that it was nothing, and because I know, like, people can be dilated for weeks before they give birth. My sister-in-law was dilated several centimeters before she gave birth for like 2 or 3 weeks. So I wasn't thinking that I was gonna go into labor right away. The weirdest thing was that night I was not able to sleep at all. I don't know what it was, but I was just wide awake, and in me, I don't know, it's like the weirdest thing because I'm not somebody who believes in stuff like this, but I just had this like intense feeling that I needed to pack my bag because I didn't have a hospital bag yet. I didn't have a hospital bag packed yet because I was only 34 weeks. So, I mean, I don't know, I felt this urge to pack my bag. So I packed all of the baby stuff, like everything that she would need, and then I packed a little bit like of the stuff that I would need, and I didn't pack anything for Andrew, but I packed this little bag, and then I decided to lay on my couch just because I couldn't sleep and I didn't want to bother Andrew because he's a very light sleeper. So I was laying on the couch, and I noticed that my stomach was tight. Like I would feel my stomach turn like rock hard, and then it would stop and go away. Rock hard and then stop. And I'm like, you know, I wonder if that's a contraction. Like maybe they're Braxton Hicks. And so I started to time them just for fun. I don't know why I started doing this, but I did. And I noticed like most of them were like the normal, like I would be having them for like, you know, 30 seconds to, you know, 50 seconds on, and then I'd stop for a few minutes and then go back 30 seconds on. But I was also having some that were going on for like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and I'm like, this is weird. And I kind of just assumed I was feeling like it was in my head, and you know that wasn't actually happening, and I was doing something wrong because I knew contractions were not supposed to last that long. And also, although they felt like I felt this tightening, I did not feel any pain at all. There was no pain associated with this. It's just like this tightening, like your stomach is tensing up. So I continued timing them throughout the night and then into Wednesday morning. And then I kind of stopped because I'm like, this is silly. These probably aren't contractions what I'm feeling, because like they're not supposed to last that long. So I kind of just stopped. And that afternoon I was supposed to be getting my second beta shot, because you get there, it's a series of 2 shots. And right before I left to go to the doctor on Wednesday afternoon, I went to the bathroom and part of my mucus plug came out, and it just is so gross. So, I mean, this is going to be a TMI video, obviously, because it's a birth story. So if that bothers you, just feel free to turn this off. But, it was just like this little glob of like mucusy looking stuff that was in the toilet after I went to the bathroom, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so luckily I was going to the doctor for my shot, so once I got there I told them what happened, and they're like, oh my gosh. And I'd also told them about the the tightening feeling. They're like, you better go to the hospital right away, and just so that they can monitor you and see what's going on. So I went home and I got all of stuff together, and Andrew and I drove to the hospital, and Andrew thought this was the silliest thing ever. He's like, you're not going into labor, it's way too early. They're just gonna be monitoring you for several hours, and we're gonna have to come home in the middle of the night and be exhausted for work the next day, and it's gonna cost us a bunch of money. And like, we were so stressed out about it because we just assumed it was silly and we were just gonna be wasting all this time and money for no reason. But we went anyways because it was recommended by the doctor, and obviously it turned out we needed to be there. So we get to the hospital and we finally get into like this little, I don't even know if it's like a triage room or what, but it was like, it's separate. It's before you get admitted to the hospital. There's this tiny little room, and they hooked me up to a monitor, and everything was looking fine. They said I definitely was having contractions. And then they noticed that I was having these really long contractions. So I was not crazy. I was having these really long contractions. And when I would have them, the baby's heart rate was dropping like really low. So they would rush in there, see the baby's heart rate dropping, and kind of freak out. And they'd have me like move onto my side, onto my left side, and then onto my right side until the baby's heart would go back up to normal. So because of that, they told me that we could not leave and that we had to stay overnight. And unfortunately, because we were just being monitored, I wasn't able to get like a proper room. So we were in this tiny little room, and poor Andrew was just on this plastic chair for the longest time, until they eventually, I think like at like 2 a.m. or something, they were able to find him like a lounger chair, and they brought that to him, which was really, really nice. But the worst part of this whole thing was, because the baby's heart rate was dropping, the nurses and doctors were concerned that I would have to have an emergency C-section. So they did not let me eat or drink. And the eating was fine, like I could handle that, especially I had eaten before we left because my mom knew that my mom was with me at the doctor, and she's like, you better eat before you go to the hospital because you don't know what's going to happen. So I wasn't hungry, but I wasn't allowed to drink. And being pregnant, I was so thirsty. And I was just like dying for water, but I couldn't have anything all night. But yeah, so that was like the worst part. So throughout the night, they kept monitoring me, and there were a few more instances where they would come rushing in because the baby's heart rate would drop and move me around, and then things would go back to normal. So it was so funny because I was like counting down the minutes till it would be morning so that I would know if I would be able to drink again or if I was going to be having my C-section. And I assumed that the doctor would come in pretty early, like 7 or 8, to tell me this information, but it wasn't until 11 that we got any information as to what was going on. We were waiting for this specialist doctor to come in. It was like a high-risk specialist, and it was just taking a long time. I think it was like 11 until we got news that I was in fact allowed to eat because my baby, oh my gosh, because my contractions were stabilized enough that they weren't considering me high risk anymore. And so I I ordered food, but we didn't end up getting it till like 2. It was so funny. I ordered food and I was able to drink my water, and it was wonderful. So finally a doctor came in after, like, I think it was actually before we even got my food. The doctor came in and talked to us. they said that I could most likely go home, but they wanted to monitor me for a little while longer. And so I was continuing to be monitoring, and then eventually someone came in and did a cervical check on me because I requested it, because I was having these really weird pains. It was like, so the day before I'd had a cervical check and it was extremely painful, and the pain of that, like that I felt during the cervical check, was the pain that I was, like a pain that I was having throughout the night. And it's just like the stabbing pain in my cervix area, I guess. That's how I would describe it. And it would last for like a few seconds and then go away. And it was pretty intense. And so I asked them if they could do another cervical check before they sent me home. And they did, and I was dilated to a 3, a little over a 3, I think. And they're like, okay, this means you can't leave. We're admitting you. And so they were going to send me home, which is crazy, but I'm glad I asked for the cervical check. But the good thing about this was they moved us to a nice room upstairs, like a proper room, and it was this big room. It overlooked the city, which was really nice, and it had a bathroom. We were able to shower and relax. Andrew had like a proper like bed, not a bed, but it was like a pull-out bed type of thing, and it was nice and comfortable. My parents came to visit that night, and we were just talking because we still didn't know. We didn't know if I was going to end up having the C-section or not that night or the next day, because no one really knew what was going on with me. I was just like continuously being monitored, and nurses were coming in all the time to check me, like check my vitals and all of that and review the monitoring, but I hadn't spoken to many doctors about like what the action plan was going to be, so we weren't quite sure. So Thursday night, there were a few instances that were really, really scary where I would be sleeping and then I'd get up to go to the bathroom and my contractions would get really, really intense. I guess it would be an intense contraction and a very long one, and the baby's heart rate would drop, and the nurses would come running in, tell me, like rush me into bed and have me switch sides until the baby's heart rate got back to normal. And it was just really scary because they seemed so concerned. So the baby's heart rate was like 150, 160, like at its normal, and then when her heart rate would drop, it would get into like the 60s or even lower. I think like in the 50s, 60s when it was like at its lowest. And so they were really scaring me. But they would always go back to normal after, like I would lay down and like go from side to side. So that was the good thing, and I think that's why they didn't rush to do an emergency C-section at the time, because she would stabilize right away. But it was a really intense night, and I was like so scared to move because I didn't, like once I would get into a good position where her heart rate was stabilized, I didn't want to move because I didn't want to make anything happen. Like I didn't want to reduce her heart rate again. And the crazy thing was, the whole time I could feel like when my stomach was tightening, kind of like especially if I was concentrating, but it wasn't like any intense feeling. I felt no pain or anything the whole time, which was great for me. But it was weird because I guess I expected to be in a lot of pain during labor and I didn't feel anything. So we made it through Thursday night, and then Friday morning a doctor came in and she told me that they were going to induce me and see how it went. They said that they're not sure if when they induce me, if the increase in my contractions is going to put the baby into distress with her heart rate, and then we would have to do an emergency C-section, or if the induction medication would stabilize her and put me into just a normal labor and everything go okay. So it's kind of like this tester thing. And so they hooked me up to Pitocin, and I think I started at a 2 and I went up to a 6 eventually on the Pitocin. But yeah, they started me off at a 2 and everything was fine. The contractions were getting a lot more frequent, so I was having them every like 3-ish minutes, but I didn't feel any pain still. And unfortunately, so they tested me. They did a strep B test on me, which is a test that you need to get before you give birth. It just tests to see if there's I think it's just some bacteria that you have that you could pass on to the baby and get them, they could become sick, or you could become sick. I don't really remember actually. You need to know if you have it, because if you do test positive for it, you need to be on antibiotics before you give birth. And they tested me the previous day, I believe, but I never got I didn't get the results back in time. So like, we have to give you the antibiotic, and how they do it, it's penicillin, at least for me it was. And they had to administer it through an IV because that's just what they do when you're in labor. And I don't want to scare anybody because I'm sure like could totally just be me, but I didn't feel any contractions the whole time. But the penicillin was the most painful thing I've ever experienced. She said it was gonna feel like a burning, like there'd be like this burning sensation. So I've had that before when I've gotten an IV, so I just assumed it would kind of be like, you know, this mild like tingly burning pain in my arm. It was the most excruciatingly painful thing that I've ever experienced. It kind of felt like my arm was breaking off. So I called them. I told Andrew, I'm like, can you please call the nurse back? And I think something's wrong. Like I was kind of getting nervous and wanted to rip the IV out of my arm because I'm like, this can't be right. Something's wrong with the IV. It's putting something bad in me. Like my arm felt like it was on fire and being ripped apart. It was the most weird and horrible thing. It was the worst part of my birth. But which I guess I shouldn't complain because that's a good thing. But yeah, it was not what I was expecting, and I had to have you have to have I think 2 bags of it every 3 hours or 4 hours or something. I don't remember. But so but the good thing is that after the first bag, that was the most intense. It got better. So any other time I was administered the penicillin, it wasn't nearly as bad, but it was rough getting through that. So eventually they gave me a cervical check again, and I was 4 centimeters dilated, and so they said that this would be a great time to break my water and progress things. When they break your water, it can make your contractions a lot more intense, and I wasn't feeling any pain at all, and I really didn't want to feel pain. I was doing so well. I was worried that if the contractions started to become painful, that I would get really anxious. Because honestly, I was not sure how I was going to do during labor. I'm a very, very anxious person, specifically regarding my health and being in the hospital and all of that. Like I have panic attacks about health-related things, so I wasn't sure how I was going to handle labor. I was like, I'm either going to be panicking or it's going to be one of those things where I'm exceptionally calm. So I was really worried about the pain because I didn't want that to put me into a negative mental space. So I'm like, so I agreed with them to do the epidural before breaking the water. And I was a little bit nervous about the epidural because I hear like mixed things. I've heard mixed things about it. Like some people say it was quite painful and other people say it wasn't a big deal at all. So they got me up onto the bed and they gave me like a pillow to hug, and they wiped my back and they put like this sheet, like this shower curtain type thing on my back, and they numbed it. And the numbing thing that they put, the numbing shot they gave me, I think it wasn't even painful at all. It just felt like a tiny little prick. It didn't even feel like a bee sting like they said it would. It was just this little prick that numbed my back. And then they put in this tube. And when they put in the tube, it feels like pressure. It doesn't hurt at all because you're numb. And it's like this like weird pressure and like warm feeling, like kind of radiating up your back. So it was kind of weird and slightly uncomfortable, but it wasn't painful at all. And yeah, that you just feel like this rush of like warmth and like pressure going on your back. And then they do a few tests to see, they ask you a few questions to see if you're experiencing any side effects. And if you're not, then you're good to go, and you just lay down. And this might make you a bit squeamish, so if you're squeamish about needles, don't listen to this part. But I thought that, well, I didn't know much about the epidural, but I thought it was like a needle actually in your back, but it is not. It's a tube, so it's a bendable tube, so you can lay on your back and fine. You don't have to, I was like so worried that I would have this needle in my back and I'd be laying down, because you're laying on your back most of the time if you have an epidural, and I was scared that if I would move, it would poke me or something, but no. It's just this like little plastic tube thing, and totally pliable, and it does not hurt. You don't feel it or anything. So that was all good. The epidural experience was great. And so if you're worried about an epidural, I would not be too worried about it because it was not painful for me at all. So after the epidural, they came in and broke my water with this weird little hook thing. And again, I didn't feel anything because I had the epidural. And it was weird though, because like they go in with the hook and like do that kind of a motion and pop the water. And apparently the amniotic sac was really, really thick for some reason for me, so she had a hard time doing it. But once she did, you feel like this rush of water come out, and it's like the weirdest sensation ever. Like you're peeing yourself. But Yeah, so she did that, and once my water was broke, my contractions sped up pretty quickly. I didn't really realize, I didn't feel anything. I couldn't even, honestly, unless I was like really focusing, I couldn't even feel my stomach tightening at all. And so after, I don't even know, honestly, the timeline of what happened when on Friday was like, I don't know. I was not like paying attention because I was just really tired and I was really hungry and thirsty. So after a while, it wasn't very long after they broke my water, maybe like an hour or two, they checked me again and I was borderline 7-8 centimeters. So they decided to start preparing me to push. And the pushing was the thing I was probably most nervous about the whole labor thing, because I was, one, worried that I wasn't going to be able to do it and I would do it right. And two, I was worried about the pressure. So like people described like this intense pressure, like you have to poop. And I just thought, you know, that's going to be extremely uncomfortable and I'm not going to be able to handle it. And I'm going to freak out. And so I was really, really nervous. So we did some practice pushes, and then eventually I was 10 centimeters and it was time to actually start pushing. And the hardest part with the pushing was the having to hold your breath. So how they instructed me to push was to take a really, really big deep breath in, hold it and push for 10 seconds, then let it out, take a deep breath again really, really quickly, and then push for another 10 seconds. And I was pushing fine, actually. They said I was pushing really well, but I would lose my breath so quickly. So I'd take a deep breath and I'd start pushing and holding my breath, but I had such a hard time making it to 10 seconds, so it was giving me a bit of anxiety. But I guess like when I was pushing, they kept commenting how low the baby was. Like the baby was low in my pelvis the entire time. Like her head was right there. They could feel it. It was weird. Like I didn't have to like have this long time of pushing before, you know, the baby was down really low, which was great for me. But it was just weird. Like I wonder why she was just really ready to be born, I guess. But I pushed for about 40 minutes, but it seemed, honestly, like people talk about how long they pushed for. The 40 minutes went by so quickly. Like it felt, in my mind, I pushed for 5 or 10 minutes. It did not feel like 40 minutes. So I'm sure for people who've pushed for a few hours, it's probably exhausting, but it does not feel as long as it does, I'm assuming. I don't know, but so I would not be too worried about that if that's something you're worried about. It does feel like it goes by really quick. I pushed for, 40 minutes, and then right when the baby was about to be born, a horde of people came in. I mean, like 10 more people came in. There was a bunch of people just watching, and then there's the people who were going to help with the baby when she was born. But it was just like this, it was so funny. I felt like I was like a spectacle. And, you know, before I went into labor, I was really, really like nervous about the whole just being exposed in front of all these people. Like I wanted to, I don't know. I felt very nervous because I'm very like shy and like, I don't know. I, I thought that it would really bother me. But when I was there, I wasn't even in pain. I just didn't care. Like I just felt totally comfortable. I was just naked in front of all these people and it was fine. Even the horde of people that came in when I was going to push. So, the baby came out at 7:19 p.m. Yes, you did. And she came out screaming like a mandrake, and everything was great. Like I felt really good. I got a borderline 2nd degree tear. It was like a borderline 1st, 2nd degree, and they were stitching me up while I was holding the baby, and I didn't feel anything. I was kind of nervous about that too, but I didn't feel anything. And the funny thing is that a lot of people talk about how like the idea of their child being born like helps them through the pushing process and through labor. And honestly, I don't want to say this and like be taken the wrong way, because I was so excited about her being born. But I was so hungry and so tired. Like because the previous day, it was the Tuesday to Wednesday, I wasn't allowed to eat at all. And then Friday I didn't eat at all either. So like there was just a lot of like not eating in that time period. The whole time I was pushing, I was thinking about having a chocolate milkshake and how wonderful it was going to be to have this milkshake after I gave birth, and it was going to feel so refreshing and I'm going to feel so good. A milkshake and french fries. And so after we gave birth and we were moved to our room, Andrew went to a restaurant and got me a milkshake and fries, and it was wonderful. But yeah, she was born. They put her on my chest. We did skin to skin. It was really weird because I almost feel kind of like in shock. At least I did. I felt in shock that this baby was just born. It came out of me and it's mine, and it's just a really weird experience. It was great. Like I felt so happy and cozy with her on me, but like I didn't feel that immediate like super attachment to her, which I think is normal, and that's why I wanted to mention it in here. Like not everyone feels immediately attached to their baby, and that's fine. That doesn't mean you don't love them. It's just sometimes the attachment takes a little while to develop, and that's totally okay and normal. Yeah, it was just a really weird feeling to have this baby on you, and it's yours and your responsibility now. And yeah, it was such a crazy, wild experience. And Andrew watched the whole thing, which I did not expect because he is very squirmish about birth. Like I don't know, he's not one of those people who's like, oh, birth's such a magical thing. He's like, oh, it's such a, like a weird thing that happens. But he watched the whole thing. He did great. He was so good with supporting me. He helped me mentally through the whole thing. And yeah, he was great. And he was especially great for getting me the milkshake afterwards. So yeah, that is my birth story with baby Luna. It went so much better than I anticipated. I am somebody who usually has all the side effects. Like with the medical stuff, like if there's a side effect that's going to be had, I'm going to have it. So I just kind of assumed I would have a really traumatic birth experience, but I didn't. It was really great. I've heard horrible things about inductions, but so I originally, like, I did not want to have an induction, but no, it went perfectly fine. I was not in pain the whole time, and I honestly, I couldn't have asked for a better experience. She was born at 35 weeks one day, and we were kind of worried, like we were assuming she would have to be in the NICU, but that's not how they do it anymore, I guess. I think it's after 35 weeks, if they pass all their tests and are doing well enough, then they can go home. So she had to, so she had a little bit of jaundice, so she had to be under a light for a while, which was kind of horrible because they had her just naked in her diaper, just under this light, and it's not like a warm light, it's just a light. So I just felt it was so sad seeing her in that, but it was cute because they gave her like these little glasses to cover her eyes. So there was that, and then she was passing her glucose test, and then eventually she didn't. And so for the glucose test, they're just testing your sugar levels, and they do it by pricking their feet, which is so sad. But she was doing good. So how it works is they do the blood test, and she has to pass every single one that they do, and I don't know if it's 16 hours of tests, I don't remember. But if you fail one, then you have to start from the very beginning. And she did end up failing one, and they had us feed her this formula that was, because I was breastfeeding her, but they had a supplement with this high sugar formula. And then we started the glucose test over again, and she did fine and passed them all. And so we stayed 2 extra days after she was born in the hospital, and we were together. They didn't take her away or anything. And then we were able to go home, and it was like, it couldn't have been a better experience. I'm so happy. I'm scared to have another child, because if I do, I don't think it could possibly go as well as this one did. So, oh my gosh. I just started some coffee because Andrew is out, and he asked if I can make some decaf, and so now I just realized there's going to be this really obnoxious noise in the background because we have one of those old style coffee makers that kind of percolates the coffee, and it's really obnoxious, so I apologize if you hear that. But yeah, that is Luna's birth story. I hope you guys enjoyed this and found it helpful. I really, really enjoyed watching birth stories when I was pregnant. They just made me feel excited, and also that's how I learned so much about the birth experience. Like, I did not learn anything from my doctor. I learned everything from watching people's vlogs on YouTube. So I hope that this was helpful for you guys, and that you have the best of luck with your pregnancies and wonderful birth experiences. I'm going to relax with little Pee-wee for a little while until it is time for her to wake up and have a snack. So yes, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it so much. And please, if you like my content, please give me a follow and like this video. Leave a comment below. I love to hear from you guys. And yeah, see you in the next vlog. Bye.